Howdy and welcome to the F1 Hatchet. This is my mid-season ranking. We'll see what each driver is currently ranked, where they were ranked in my preseason ranking, and where I've ranked them on the average of each race that they have performed in. And without further ado, I will move on to the 21st position of Daniel Ricciardo. So he is currently ranked 21st in the driver ranking from the official Formula One site. I have him ranked at 8th due to his couple of races and his average being a 6.5 out of 10 on my ranking scale. I thought he was doing a little bit above average in that AlphaTauri. My expectations might be a little bit skewed. We'll see how he ends up with the rest of the season. I've only had a couple of races to actually see his performance, and we'll see if he can actually keep that up through the rest of this season or not. And I didn't have a preseason ranking because he was not listed as a driver. So since he was switched out with from Nick DeVries, he did not get a preseason ranking. This comes to our 20th spot on the official chart was Nick DeVries. I have him ranked as 21st in overall my ranking with a average of 4.35 out of 10. I actually had him ranked pretty decent, 17th overall in my preseason ranking, so he has dropped some places. I was thinking he was going to be a little bit ahead of Logan Sargent with his experience that he's had in other race series and some of his Formula One races, that he would be able to take that AlphaTauri a little bit farther up the grid than he has been. So I'm a little bit disappointed in Nick DeVries and how he has performed. So overall, he's dead last in my ranking system. This goes to the official 19th position for Logan Sargent. I have him at 20th overall, with a ranking of 4.83 out of 10. I had him on my preseason being dead last, mainly because I figured Nick DeVries was going to be ahead of him. Logan was a rookie, and Nick DeVries had some experience in the past. So I figured that Williams wasn't going to be that very good, and he would be just tailing in at the back of the pack. He is kind of a little bit above that, but not a whole lot. I'm kind of disappointed in Logan. I figured even now with that Williams performance, he should be doing a little bit better than he has been. Hopefully he can get some ground on these European tracks that we're going into in the next half of the season and get some confidence and pull that ranking up a little bit higher. Then we come to 18th position overall, and that's Kevin Magnussen. My rating is 18th, so that falls into place for each driver for each race that we have averaged out with an average of 5.33. I had him actually ranked fairly high in my preseason ranking at 10. I figured Kevin is coming back and he was doing well, and I thought that Haas was going to come out and do some pretty good stuff, and he was going to be able to get into that 10th position overall. That has not played out. I am very disappointed in Kevin, even though he's doing an okay job in that Haas. I was thinking that Haas was going to be a little bit better than it has been, and that they have some improvements that they could bring out in that Haas to help them along, but that has not occurred. So he is currently in 18th position. And then we get to the 17th position of Yuki Tsunoda, which I have him on my average ranking of 5.96, which puts him in the 16th spot. I had him a little bit farther back in 18th. I didn't think that Yuki was going to be the leader of that AlphaTauri, and he has shown that he has actually come out a little bit stronger. And now with Daniel to push him, hopefully he can keep that up in the next half of the season. Then we come to 16th position of Guan Yu Zhou, who I have ranked at 19th with an average of 5.25. He is kind of disappointed me. I had him up in 15th spot, so not too terribly off from my preseason ranking, but overall in the driver's performance, he has kind of dropped back a little bit in that Alfa Romeo. The Alfa Romeo course has not been performing at all like I was expecting it to during this season. I was actually thinking that they'd be a lot more competitive in this and maybe a little bit tighter race, even though I only had him up a spot in the preseason. Then we get Valtteri Bottas in the official 15th position. And due to my ranking, he's down to 17th at 5.5 average for each race. And I had him all the way up in 8th position in my preseason. I was thinking that Valtteri would actually show that his experience was going to perform and that Alfa Romeo was going to be able to do a little bit better job than it has been. So he has dropped significantly from my preseason. So I messed up on that preseason view of him early on. But my average is a couple of points behind the actual ranking of him through the official system. This comes to 14th position, where Nico Hülkenberg is. I have him on the driver's ranking at 12th with a 6.08 ranking out of 10. He's outperformed his teammate Kevin Magnussen pretty significantly in this. I actually had him at 13th, so I dropped him a position from my preseason to where he's currently ranked. So not too bad there, but I was expecting that Haas and his teammate to be ahead of him, and that is not the case. So I have to eat my words there. Nico has done a really good job. I figured he would be coming in learning, and Kevin would be actually the leader of that team, which has not occurred. Nico's kind of come in and shown Kevin what he can do in those qualifying sessions, even though he's fallen back in the actual race where Kevin exceeds a little bit better in the overall pace. But Nico's actually really showing really well what he can do in that Haas in the qualifying sessions and getting that one lap pace out of that Haas. So hopefully they can work together and try to get a little bit higher on that Haas, or a little bit more competitive at least with the rest of the field. So bringing some updates, hopefully. I know they don't like updates real well, but I think they really need that in that Haas to actually be competitive. Then we get to the 13th position of Alex Albon. His ranking overall, I have him at 14th with an average of 6 point even out of 10. So he's doing a above average job in that Williams. I had him at 19th. I didn't think that Williams was going to be where it was this season. I thought it was going to be at the back of the pack, and that has proven wrong. And he's able to actually drive pretty well in that Williams and pulling everything he can get out of that Williams, I think, for the most part. He's had some bad races, but I think he's doing a fairly good job in that Williams. So he's actually up to 14th position in my average driver ranking. Then we come to the 12th position of Pierre Gasly. He has an average of 6.29, which puts him in 10th on my average driver ranking for each race. And I had him a little bit farther back at 14th. I didn't think that Alpine in Pierre Gasly was going to perform quite as well as he has coming from that Alfa Romeo. Sorry, not Alfa Romeo, that Alpha Tauri. Excuse me. And I figured since he was switching over, he would have to learn a little bit more. But he has come out pretty strong and done a really well job showing what he can do. So he will proceed on back of this season. And I think he's going to maybe even move up in this average here. We'll have to wait and see. So this comes to the actual 11th position of Oscar Piastri, who in my ranking is actually 11th on the average of 6.25 out of 10. I had him farther way back in the pack at 16th overall in my preseason. I've kind of believed some of the hype of that McLaren, saying that they were not going to do very well in this preseason, and I didn't think that they were going to catch up near as much as they have. I figured with all the other updates that all the other constructors were going to have, that was going to keep them more at the back of the pack, even though they were getting some updates. I figured the updates would not outpace the rest of the constructors. So I was thinking that they were going to be farther off the constructors' points scale as well. But Oscar has actually done a fairly well job in that McLaren, keeping up with Lando Norris for the most part and kind of showing him what he can do. He's still some learning to do to try to get the smooth and get that most out of that McLaren like Lando does. But he can get the pace out of it, and it's actually been ahead of Lando in a few races, so that is really good to see. So he's kind of matched my average ranking for him, and I kind of outshined what I thought he was going to do in that McLaren this season overall from my preseason view. So good job on Oscar Piastri. This comes to the top 10 of where Esteban Ocon is in that 10th position. I have him in the average of ranked 9th with a 6.33 out of 10 for his average performance this season. I had him at 9th on my preseason, so he's kind of fitting my view of his driving style, even though he's a little bit farther back in the official ranking. I think Ocon has done a fairly good job in that Alpine. They were starting off kind of okay and falling back a little bit, and hopefully they've kind of made some amends and some fixes and upgrades on that Alpine so they can start pushing forward again at the back half of this season. So hopefully we'll see a little bit more from those Alpine vehicles and those two drivers. This leads us to the 9th position of Lance Stroll in that Aston Martin. I have him farther back in the pack at 15th on his average driver ranking of 5.96. So he's just above average, but he's not really that great of a shining in that Aston Martin like he should be. The preseason, I had him at 11th. I figured that Aston Martin was going to do a lot better overall, and I think that was kind of that setting. He was going to be just behind his teammate. But he hasn't really shown that. I mean, he's done a decent job, but not the great job that we need him to do in that Aston Martin for that Aston Martin to be really competitive this season. So we'll see if he can step that up in the back half of the season, see if he can get closer to his teammate Fernando. But overall, we have him at 15th, which is farther back than my preseason. So I had him ranked a little bit higher than what he is currently ranked in my view, but he is definitely higher than both my preseason and my regular ranking in the official ranking. So I guess he's doing an okay job in the point standing section of this official ranking, so that's decent for him. Then we get Lando Norris at 8th position. I have him ranked at actually 6th over on my average race ranking at 6.88 out of 10. And I had him at the preseason of 12. So again, I thought that McLaren was not going to do as well as it has done in this at the end of this first part of the season. And like it was at the very beginning, I didn't think they were going to catch up near as much as they have in this last few races. I thought he was doing a really good job pulling what he can out of that McLaren, and we can kind of see that in how he's moving up in the ranking system and getting those points overall, officially and unofficially, in my average ranking for those races. So a really good job for Orlando, and I think he's going to pull Oscar along with them, where he can teach Oscar everything he can of driving that McLaren. So I think those McLarens are going to do fairly well in this back half of this season. Hopefully they can get up closer. I know they're not going to really fight the Red Bulls overall in the constructors standings, but hopefully they can get up there and push a little pressure on those Red Bull drivers for the first laps of the races or whatever that comes through. Give a little bit more entertainment for the fans, hopefully. And maybe even, if it's not that, then they can toss it up with the Ferraris and the Mercedes, potentially the Aston Martins in that next batch that comes right behind the Red Bulls. So hopefully that'll give us a little bit more entertainment in this second half of the season with the McLarens doing that big push and getting a big jump in time for them. So then we come to the 7th position of Carlos Sainz. I have him ranked farther back at 13th on my driver ranking with a 6.04. He's had some issues in that Ferrari. I don't think he's actually pulled out quite as much out of that Ferrari as he should be able to. even though I really like him. I like him kind of better than Charles, but he is ranked farther back in my grid. I had him actually ranked up at third on my preseason. I thought he was going to be that, the end of that podium position markers, and I thought he was going to do really well in that Ferrari, but that hasn't really panned out too terrible. But he's doing a decent job in that Ferrari, just not quite as where I would like him to be, pulling every ounce out of that Ferrari to really compete. So he is ranked 7th officially and ranked 13th in my race-by-race average. So pretty far down from where my third preseason racing. So I kind of messed up on that preseason prediction for him so far. We'll see if he can push that up closer to the second half of this season or not. This comes to George Russell in the official 6th position, who on my race-by-race average is 5th with a 7.38 out of 10. So doing a pretty good job there, pulling what he can out of that Mercedes, and compared to his teammate, beating his teammate early on in the season. I know lately he's playing second fiddle, but overall I think he's doing a really good job in that Mercedes. I had him ranked up to 7th in that preseason, so he's doing a little bit better than what I was predicting for the Mercedes and George Russell, so a good job for George. In 5th place, we have Charles Leclerc, who I have on their race-by-race average at 7th with a 6.63 average. I actually had him coming in 2nd in my preseason predictions, so he's dropped back from that, but he's done a fairly well job in that Ferrari, even though it's not the best job he can probably perform. He's made a few mistakes in that Ferrari that have cost him, and of course Ferrari's made several mistakes in their planning of their strategy for the races, so that's hurt him as well. I tried to not let that hurt him in the race average, trying to get the most out of that vehicle that he can, and compared to his teammates. So those are the things that I was kind of looking at when I do those averages for the race. But decent job from Charles. This brings us to 4th position with Lewis Hamilton. And I have him ranked at 3rd on the race-by-race with a 7.79 average out of 10. I had him at 5th in my preseason. I thought they were going to be decent, but not the best. And he has kind of pushed that, jumped up to 4th officially and 3rd overall in my race-by-race average. So good job for Lewis to be able to pull out what he can out of that Mercedes. I know he started off pretty poorly, letting George take the lead on some of those races, but he has come back in this into this first half of the season, doing a really good job and pushing those Mercedes to their limit. So good for him to rally again and push his way back to the front in that Mercedes that is lacking in performance. This comes to the 3rd official position of Fernando Alonso, who I have ranked as 4th in my my race-by-race average of 7.75. So he's not too far from Lewis. So he's right there hounding him for that actual 3rd position in my average. But he's ahead officially with the points. So that's a good job for Fernando. I had him 6th overall. So I had him actually behind Lewis in the overall running in my preseason predictions. So he's actually done a really good job overall to push that forward from my preseason thoughts to actual performance. So good job on Fernando. I know he's had some issues, and that Aston Martin is not quite looking as what it should be at the end of this first half, where we saw him early on. Hopefully they can make those adjustments in that second half of the season and put them back in that running where they were at the very first of the season. I like Fernando. I think he's a crafty driver, and he's kind of working his way as much as he can with his teammate Lance Stroll to get the most points for those Aston Martins. So he's doing a really good job mentally, I think, even though he's kind of struggled in a couple of races. of late, but overall doing a really good job. This comes to the nice Red Bull pair of Sergio Perez in second position. My driver ranking has him in second position with a 7.79, kind of tied with Lewis Hamilton. So that's kind of right there along those lines, battling it out. So not quite where his teammate is. So he's kind of lacking from his teammate. But from the rest of the field, he's doing a fairly good job. My preseason ranking was fourth. I thought he was going to struggle a little bit more than he has. But I know that's kind of bad to say, even though because he's been struggling with some qualifying sessions and having to work his way back through that field. But that Red Bull is so fast that he can kind of gain those grounds and do a decent job. So with that average of 7.79, I think he's doing a decent job. But it doesn't quite match where his teammate is with Max, several points ahead of him on the average. So I think they could probably do a little bit better in driver in that Red Bull if they can get that most out of that Red Bull like Max can. But who can actually do that? That's a big question. If they can get somebody in there to really push Max in that Red Bull to actually have some competitiveness in that first position. This leads us to the course of the first position, which is first overall officially and in my driver ranking, and he is ranked 9.38 out of 10. So he's almost got a pretty decent ranking, not quite a perfect score. He's made a few mistakes here and there, but he's kind of made up for them in the race, mostly losing that first position on the starts and stuff like that. I think he messed up once in qualifying, but he's made his way back through the field to get maximum points that he can fairly easily. So that puts him kind of a league ahead of everyone else in this race by race ranking that I have. It's hard to really judge when he's not getting super pressure from the rest of the field on those, how much he's actually getting out of that Red Bull. Or it could be the fact that he's getting the most out of the Red Bull and no one else can. So that could be that too, that he's deserves that 9.38 ranking. It's kind of an opinion, obviously. And so, but that's where I have him in my overall ranking. And of course I had him preseason ranked as 1. I thought he was going to win the championship. But I thought it'd be a lot closer in the battle. And so he's not. And so that my preseason, view of that is a little skewed, even though he is ranked 1 overall in my preseason and officially. This leads us to the Constructors Champions. This is a little skewed because I didn't actually rank the Constructors race by race, and so I was using the average of both or all drivers that were racing for that constructor, which is kind of compared to each driver in that constructor, so that the average can be skewed a little bit, but I didn't have anything else, and I'll have to work on that probably next season to start ranking each constructor as well to see how that plays out in this mid-season and end of the season ranking system. So without further ado, we start off in the 10th position of the official Constructors Championship with AlphaTauri. My ranking is 8th, and with a 5.6 rating system, and my preseason was 9th. So they dropped back a spot from my preseason and are not doing as well as what my ranking of each drivers would have matched out with that constructors. So you can take that with a grain of salt. So you can just, if you want to, you can just look at the preseason versus the official Constructors Championship to see where I've laid out from the early season to the mid-season. This comes with Alfa Romeo at 9th officially. I had them in 6th on my preseason, and right now they are 10th in my average with a 5.38 out of 10 ranking for both drivers. This comes to Haas in 8th position, which I had them above that in 7th on my preseason. So a spot above what they are currently at. But my ranking for each driver's average puts them in that same 7th position that they my preseason ranking was, with an average of 5.71 out of 10. This leads us to Williams, who is currently in 7th. My average of each driver ranking came to 5.42, which puts them in 9th. In my preseason, I had them dead last in 10th. So they've moved up officially and are actually, if you just look at the drivers, they've moved up a little bit as well. So good job on those Williams constructors. Hopefully they can still make improvements and push forward as well. And I think they're doing a really good job with where they ended up last season. A decent improvement. Alpine, I had them in preseason at ranked 5. They are currently ranked 6th, so they're not quite matching up to my expectations preseason. And if you look at both drivers' averages, they ended up at 6.31, which puts them in 6th where they currently are. Alpine's doing a average job, kind of right there in that mid-pack. They were struggling at points and excelling at points, kind of a up and down season so far for them. Hopefully they can get a little bit more steady and be able to push forward in the Constructors' Championships and have that battle out with the McLarens and possibly the Ferraris in this Constructors' Championship. And we come to 5th, which is where McLaren has jumped up to. My driver ranking has pushed them a little bit farther up with a 4 with a 6.56 out of 10 ranking. And my preseason, I said, was farther back at 8th. So, and they started off really poorly, and they kind of pushed themselves all the way up to 5th in the Constructors' Championships. So that's a really good to see for the McLaren actually making those improvements, even with that really poor start that they've had this season. If they can continue that on, it'll be a sight to see for this season, watching those McLarens just improve significantly. I expect that they'll probably put pressure on Ferrari and Aston Martin, and so we'll see if they can actually overtake them and compete for that second position in the Constructors' Championship or not. At this rate, they will be. Hopefully, we'll see some fights in that front, and it'll be entertaining. 4th position goes to Ferrari, and I had them preseason at ranked 1. I thought both Ferraris would come close to Max and have some battles there. But overall, I figured, with both Ferraris drivers performing and Sergio dropping off in my preseason predictions, that they would actually beat them in the Constructors' Championships, even though Max was 1. This has not been the case at all. Ferrari's been struggling, even though they've been up in the top of the field, messing up lots of times with the drivers and with their, delivery on track with their strategies, with tire strategies, messing those up, not predicting, not pushing forward, not being attack oriented, so losing some spots there. But they have a 6.33 driver average, which puts them in 5th. So in my skewed ranking here, that may not be super accurate because they're driver rankings and not really constructor rankings. But doing a decent job, just not where I thought they should be in that 4th position overall. This comes to Aston Martin in that 3rd position, who my driver ranking matches with a 6.85 average for the drivers. And my preseason was 4th, so they've exceeded my preseason expectations of Aston Martin, but they haven't done as well as I thought they could do from the very beginning of the season. They were showing some really promise, and I was hoping that they would actually make some improvements and put pressure on that Red Bull and be in that second position fairly solidly, which they have not been able to maintain. They've kind of dropped back into that 3rd position and are kind of steady there, with Mercedes, being more that number 2 position, as we see here. Overall, the official ranking of number 2 and my driver ranking of number 2. In my preseason, I had them dropped back to third. So they've improved on that. So that's good to see that them pushing forward, trying to put a little bit of pressure on Red Bull, even though they need a lot more work in that Mercedes to really have that steady performance and drive for that Mercedes, for those drivers to really get everything they can to put pressure on the Red Bulls. They have a driver average rating of 7.58. So that's decent to see. Get the drivers actually getting most of what they can out of those Mercedes versus the rest of the field. And of course, Red Bull at number 1 and my ranking at number 1. And I had them preseason ranking at 2. So they've exceeded my preseason view of them. I thought they were going to be number 2 with them having some penalties with that budget cap and some other things, being number 1, not having quite the development time that they've the rest of the field has over them, with the trying to get the race constructors championships to be closer in the rankings. I thought they were going to fall back just to that second position, and that has not been the case. They've actually excelled fairly strongly in this season, pulling out all the stops and being 20 seconds ahead of the rest of the field with Max, which is awesome to see to some degree, but horrible to see in other degree, because you don't get that fight for that first position like most fans want to see, the overtaking in that regard. So those were my constructors' views. And of course, the next official race is the Netherlands on August 27th. So coming up in a couple of weeks. And if you want to see more of my views and thoughts, you can subscribe. And if you like this video and are made it this far, I would appreciate a like. So thank you so much. And I will see you next time on the grid. Farewell.